Ready to dive into some awesome management advice? Today, we're exploring Erika Andersen's Growing Great Employees.
Oh, that's a good one.
It is, right. And we're using this gardening metaphor throughout our deep dive to really help these concepts stick.
I like that.
Yeah, by the end, you'll have some real strategies to use, whether you're a seasoned manager or just starting out.
It's interesting. Anderson starts with something really fundamental, listening.
Oh.
She compares it to preparing the soil.
Yeah,
Just like good soil is essential for plants, good listening is the foundation for being an effective manager.
makes sense.
Yeah. And she tells this story about a client who really impressed his new team.
Oh, how so?
Well, he didn't come in, giving big speeches or anything. He just focused on listening during meetings, really actively listening.
Wow. I bet that made people feel heard.
Absolutely. It set a tone of respect and open communication right from the start.
So, active listening. How do we get better at that?
Well, Anderson had this framework called the listening is model. It's got a bunch of elements, but let's just focus on inviting.
Okay.
Think about it. Even small things like nodding your head, saying, tell me more, or just your body language. All of that can make your employees feel safe, sharing their ideas.
It's about making them feel comfortable.
Exactly. But it's not always easy, right?
No, I know. Sometimes I get caught up in my own thoughts.
Yeah, we all have that internal chatter, that inner critic. Anderson actually gives this example. Imagine you've got an employee who complains a lot, and they're about to walk into your office.
Ugh, yeah, you can almost feel it coming.
Right. And your first thought might be, here we go again.
Definitely.
But what if you try to shift that self-talk?
Yeah.
Like, okay, this person's coming to me for a reason. How can I understand their perspective and help them?
So you're coming from a more helpful place.
Exactly.
That's a good mindset shift. So we've prepped the soil with good listening. What's next? Planting the seeds.
You got it. But just like you wouldn't randomly scatter seeds in a garden, we need to plan.
Okay, planning makes sense.
Anderson emphasizes knowing what you need and setting clear expectations before you even start hiring. And that's where core competencies come in.
Core competencies, what are those?
It's like the key skills and abilities that are crucial for success in your organization, the things that really drive your culture.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So how do you figure out what those are for your company?
Well, Anderson has some cool methods. One is called finding exemplars.
Mhm.
Basically, you look at the people who are already killing it in your organization.
Like the rock stars.
Exactly. And you figure out what makes them so good. It's like looking at the best plants in your garden and trying to figure out their secret.
So you're identifying the traits that lead to success in your specific environment.
Yeah. Another method is looking for clues. What's worked well in the past? Are there certain skills that have consistently led to good outcomes?
Interesting. So you're looking for patterns.
Yeah. And then there's working from a list. You can start with a list of general competencies and then tailor it to your company's specific needs.
So it's like using a pre-made garden plan, but customizing it.
Exactly. And once you've nailed down those core competencies, you can use them to find the right people.
Huh. So now we're talking hiring.
Yep. And this is where job descriptions come in. Anderson says it's not enough to just list tasks. You need to focus on those key responsibilities and what you want the person to achieve in that role.
It's about outcomes, not just tasks.
Right. It's like you don't just want someone who can water the plants. You want someone who can actually make them thrive.
I like that.
She has this example of, let's say, his name is Jorge. He's a GM building a regional HR team.
Okay.
And instead of just like writing a generic job description for an HR director, he goes through this whole process, right?
He figures out the core competencies first.
Yeah. Things like building trust and driving results.
So he's looking for someone who embodies those qualities.
Exactly. And then he uses those competencies to make a super specific job description. It even says how the director's time will be split between different responsibilities.
Wow, that is detailed.
Yeah. It's like providing a planting schedule instead of just saying, here are some seeds, good luck.
So we've prepped the soil, planned the garden. We've even planted some seeds. Now what?
Now it's time to tend to those individual plants, right? Because each one needs a little something different.
Makes sense. Not all plants are the same.
Exactly. And that's where Anderson talks about being usefully attentive as a manager.
Usefully attentive. I like that.
It means paying attention to the unique needs of each employee, just like different plants need different amounts of sun or water.
Okay, so how do we figure out what each employee needs?
Well, one tool Anderson suggests is the social style model.
Okay, the social style model. Tell me more about that.
It's all about understanding different approaches to work, Kind of like recognizing that some plants thrive in full sun while others prefer shade.
Got it. So what are the key elements of this model?
There are three main dimensions: assertiveness, responsiveness, and versatility.
Hmm. When I hear assertiveness, I think of someone being kind of pushy.
Yeah, I get that, but that's not quite what we're talking about here.
Oh, okay.
In this context, assertiveness is more about how directly someone tries to influence others. Some people are very direct, while others are more subtle.
So it's about their communication style.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's responsiveness.
What's that?
That's how openly someone shows their emotions. Some people are very expressive, while others are more reserved.
Okay, and then versatility. That sounds like a good thing.
Oh, it definitely is. That's how well someone can adapt their style to different situations.
So some people are more flexible than others.
Exactly. And the cool thing about the social style model is that it identifies four main styles: drivers, expressives, amiables, and analyticals. And each style has its own strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, so it's not like one style is better than the others.
Right. It's all about understanding those differences and adjusting your management approach accordingly.
Got it. So tell me more about these different styles. Let's start with drivers. What are they like?
Drivers are all about action and results. They are goal-oriented, decisive, like to take charge. They're like the sunflowers in your garden, strong and always reaching high.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, they really thrive on clarity and autonomy.
So if you have a driver on your team, what's the best way to manage them? Just give them a task and let them run with it.
That's a good starting point. Clear expectations and the freedom to get things done their way, that's key. But you also got to challenge them, give them tough problems to
See
solve.
them engaged.
Exactly. But drivers, well, sometimes they can be so focused on results that they might bulldoze over others or neglect relationships a bit.
Oh, I see. So you have to help them find that balance.
Yeah, like encourage them to really listen to other perspectives, even if it slows them down a bit.
So that's drivers. What about expressives?
Oh, they are the orchids of the workplace, full of color, energy, and creative ideas.
They sound fun.
They are. They love to brainstorm and connect with people,
Oh.
but they need guidance too.
Okay, so how do you manage an expressive?
Lots of interaction, freedom to share their ideas, that's important, but you also have to help them reality check their ideas sometimes.
Because they can get a little carried away.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to help them break those big ideas down into steps and think through the practical side of things.
Makes sense. On to amiables now. What are they like?
They're like lavender, bringing calm and harmony to the team. They're kind, cooperative, and care about creating a positive environment.
Oh, they sound lovely.
They really are. But because they avoid conflict, you sometimes have to encourage them to assert themselves more.
So they need a little push to stand up for themselves.
Yeah. And to be okay with a little disagreement now and then.
Okay, last but not least, we have analyticals.
The ferns. Quietly providing structure and stability. They're thoughtful, thorough, love details, and accuracy.
So how do you manage them?
Give them all the information they need. Detailed information, reasonable timelines. They love to plan and prepare.
They sound like amazing problem solvers.
They are. But sometimes they get stuck in the details.
So you have to help them see the bigger picture sometimes.
Right, and encourage them to share their thinking with others.
This social style model is so insightful. It's like a cheat sheet for understanding your team.
Right. But even with the best care, sometimes things don't go as planned.
True. We'll explore that next time. When employees, even those we carefully choose and nurture, aren't thriving as we'd hoped.
So we've covered a lot of ground: how to nurture individual plants, different social styles, how to kind of work with each of those.
It's like we've got this thriving garden going.
Right. But let's be real for a sec.
Okay, getting real.
Even when you put in all the effort, sometimes things just don't go as planned.
Oh, tell me about it. I've had those moments where I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I'm trying my best, but this employee just isn't thriving.
Yeah, Andersen talks about those situations too. When employees, even those we carefully choose and nurture, aren't quite hitting the mark.
It's like when a promising seedling suddenly wilts. Heartbreaking.
Right. And she identifies these three main problem areas, kind of like weeds that pop up in your garden.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. What are the weeds we need to watch out for?
The first one is employees not keeping agreements.
Ah, yeah, that's a classic. Happens all the time.
Right. And Andersen really stresses having super clear agreements right from the start. Remember that commit step?
Yeah, where both you and the employee are totally clear on what's expected, how you measure it, all that.
Exactly. It's like making sure a plant has the right amount of sunlight and water, right?
Got it. But even with the clearest agreements, sometimes things still go sideways. What then?
Well, before you jump to conclusions, Anderson suggests this decision tree approach.
Decision tree, okay.
Yeah, so first you got to make sure the agreement is still clear. Maybe there's a misunderstanding or things changed along the way.
Right, like maybe the employee's workload got crazy or priorities shifted.
Exactly. It's like checking the soil to see if it's gotten compacted or something.
So first, you rule out any external factors that could be messing things up.
Yep. And if everything's clear on the agreement front, then you look for obstacles. Does the employee need specific skills, maybe more resources? Or are there personal things going on that are affecting their work?
And that's where those listening skills come in handy.
Big time. You need to understand what's really going on for them. It's
Yeah.
like noticing a plant's leaves are turning yellow. You got to figure out why.
Is it lack of sunlight? Too much water?
Exactly. Got to diagnose the root cause before you can fix it. And once you've looked at all that, if they're still not meeting expectations, then it's time for a direct conversation.
Ooh, the dreaded difficult conversation. That's where I get nervous, honestly. I hate confrontation.
I hear you. But it doesn't have to be scary. Anderson's advice is to focus on the impact, not the person.
Okay. So less about them messing up, more about the consequences of those actions.
Exactly. You're not attacking them. You're just helping them see the bigger picture. Like if they miss deadlines all the time, you can point out how that affects the whole team or delays a project.
Help them connect the dots.
Right. But remember, do it with empathy. You're on the same team, and your goal is to help them succeed.
Got it. Okay, so we've clarified the agreement, checked for obstacles, had a direct conversation. What if, even after all that, the employee still isn't improving?
Well, sometimes, and this is tough,
Mm-hmm.
you might have to let them go. It's like realizing a diseased plant just can't be saved, and you got to remove it to protect the others.
Oh, yeah. That's a hard call. But I can see how it's sometimes necessary.
It's never easy, but sometimes it's the best thing for everyone involved. The company can find someone who's a better fit, and the employee can find a place where they can thrive.
Okay, so that was employees not keeping agreements. What about employees who just aren't growing? They're not really trying to learn new things or take on new challenges.
Yeah, Anderson says every employee is responsible for their own development, but some might need a little nudge.
Right, like a plant that stopped growing. Maybe needs a bigger pot or some fertilizer.
Exactly. So start by figuring out their aspirations. What do they want to achieve? What are they passionate about?
And then you can help them create a plan to get there.
Right. You can point them toward learning opportunities, connect them with mentors, give them feedback, create a space where they feel comfortable taking risks.
It's all about support and guidance.
Exactly. And then the last category of weeds is employees who aren't being good company citizens.
Company citizens. What's that about?
Think of it like this. Every plant in your garden has a role to play in the overall health of the ecosystem, right?
Sure.
Some plants might produce beautiful flowers, but if they're invasive and choke out everything else, they're actually hurting the garden in the long run.
So even if an employee is good at their job, if they're not contributing to the overall well-being of the team, they're not really thriving.
Exactly. Anderson has this story about Elaine, a sales VP, and one of her account managers, Janet. Janet's a rock star, always exceeding her targets.
Sounds great. What's the problem?
The problem is, Janet plays by her own rules. She brings in clients, but she bends the rules, and sometimes damages relationships along the way.
So she's getting results, but at what cost?
Exactly. And Elaine has to have some tough conversations with her about the impact of her actions. It's not enough to just hit your individual goals. You got to be a team player.
It's about recognizing that everyone contributes to the overall health of the garden.
Right. And just like with the agreement situation, sometimes letting someone go might be the best option, even if they're individually successful. It's about protecting the whole organization.
Wow, some heavy stuff to consider. So we've talked about employees who aren't meeting expectations, but what about us, the managers? How do we keep growing and developing, especially when faced with these challenges?
That's a great question. And that's actually what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. It's about achieving mastery in managing and growing employees.
Okay, so we've learned how to nurture our team, deal with those tricky situations like weeds in the garden.
Right.
But now I'm thinking about us, the managers. How do we level up? How do we become master gardeners, so to speak?
Well, Anderson's take on mastery is interesting. It's not like you reach this end point and you're done.
Right.
It's more about constantly learning and growing. Kind of like, even experienced gardeners are always experimenting, trying new
And
things.
always refining their techniques.
Exactly. She focuses on three main things: not stopping yourself, honoring how you learn, and working on your weaknesses.
I like that. Okay, let's start with not stopping yourself. What does that even mean? Like pushing through even when you're doubting yourself.
It's more about becoming aware of those internal barriers we all have.
Oh, you mean those voices that say, you're not good enough? Or what if you mess up?
Yeah, those like weeds trying to choke out your confidence.
Ah, I know those voices all too well.
Mm,
It's so easy to just stay in your comfort zone and avoid the scary situations.
I feel that. Anderson actually suggests this cool exercise. Think about a time recently when you stopped yourself from doing something.
Okay. Like when I hesitated to give this one employee some really tough feedback.
Exactly. Or maybe you didn't delegate a challenging project because you were afraid it wouldn't get done right.
Yep, been there.
So you identify those moments, and then you ask yourself, why did I stop myself? What was I afraid of? It's like figuring out what those pesky garden pests are before they destroy everything.
So you shine a light on those fears, bring them out into the open.
Yeah. And then you got to challenge them. Ask yourself, is this fear even true? What evidence do I have? It's like checking your soil. Is it really lacking nutrients, or are you just overthinking it?
Love that analogy. So instead of letting fear hold us back, we examine it, we see if it's even real.
Exactly. And then the second part of mastery is honoring how you learn.
Okay, how you learn. That's interesting.
We all learn differently, right? Some people learn best by doing, others by listening, others by watching. Just like some plants need lots of sun, others prefer the shade.
That's so true. It reminds me of when I was trying to learn this new software program. I just dove in and started clicking around. But my friend, she had to read the entire manual first. We both got there.
Exactly. Anderson has this story about five managers learning to run meetings, and they all have completely different approaches.
Oh, I bet. Some probably just jumped right in.
Exactly. And then others needed to observe someone else doing it first or listen to a lecture.
It's like you wouldn't water every plant in your garden the same way. Some need more, some need less.
Right. And it's the same for learning. As managers, we need to provide different opportunities that cater to different learning styles.
So hands-on experiences, mentorship programs, online courses, giving people the time to reflect on their own.
Exactly. It's all about meeting people where they are. Okay, ready for the last piece of the mastery puzzle.
Hit me with it.
It's working on your weaknesses. This one can be tough.
Oh, yeah. It's so much easier to just focus on your strengths, right?
Right. But Anderson says true mastery comes from tackling those weaknesses head on.
It's like facing those prickly plants you'd rather avoid.
Uh-huh, exactly. So first, you got to identify them. What are you not so good at? Delegation, giving feedback, saying no.
Once you know what they are, then what?
Then you make a plan. How can you practice those skills? Who can you ask for feedback?
It's like recognizing that a certain plant needs a little extra TLC. You can't just ignore it and hope for the best.
You got it. You got to
Sure.
figure out what it needs, experiment, and see what works. And it's the same with us as managers.
Wow, this has been an amazing deep dive. I love how Anderson uses this gardening metaphor. It just makes so much sense.
It's so relatable.
Yeah, it's not about barking orders. It's about nurturing, supporting, and guiding our people to grow.
It's about tending to the soil, planting the right seeds, creating the right conditions.
And just like gardening, managing and growing people is an ongoing process. You're always learning.
Always.
So, as we wrap things up, I'd love for you to think about this. What one small step can you take today to create a more thriving environment for your team? Maybe it's practicing your listening skills, or having a more mindful conversation with an employee, or picking one area where you want to grow as a leader.
Whatever it is, remember, even those experienced gardeners are still learning. Embrace the journey, experiment, and watch your team blossom.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.